Warning, this episode contains strong language or mature themes. Parental discretion is advised. Welcome to this podcast is Uncalled For. On today's edition, thoughts on being an ex-Mormon. And now, your host for this podcast, Mike Chernevsky.
Welcome to the podcast. So today's going to be another one of those thoughts recordings that we previously talked about. And this one is one I would like to get an interview on, but needs to be out there. Today's thoughts are on what it means to be an ex-Mormon. I was a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, more commonly known as the Mormon Church. I was baptized December 31st, 1996, New Year's Eve, my senior year of high school, and am officially out and have been since 2004. So 15 years officially I've been ex-Mormon. I did not grow up in a Mormon household. My family was very much Catholic. So I am both a lapsed Catholic and an ex-Mormon. Because of that, I was spared the ex-Mormon experience as experienced mostly by folks who grew up in the religion, and especially folks who grew up in Utah. And the reasons I left, well, there are a couple of reasons I officially stated in my exit letter. The first is that in LDS culture, if you happen to be male, they put a lot of pressure on you to serve a full-time mission. We're all familiar with the stereotype, young Mormon men walking into, going door to door. Hi, we're from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. We'd like to talk to you about Jesus. Yeah, there was pressure on me to do exactly that. And I was 18 at the time I converted. And was planning on either going to the Navy or going to college or whatever. Going on a full-time mission for a church I barely knew that much about at the time. Didn't quite set right with me. So that's one of them. And another one has to do with politics. See, the LDS church is a very, very conservative bunch. And being a political liberal, I just didn't feel like I fit in. So that was another stated reason that I left. And there are others, but those are the big two that come to mind. Did I have a bad experience as a Latter-day Saint? No, not necessarily. I was, baptized, held the priesthood, first Aaronic, and then eventually the Melchizedek priesthood. And you know what? That might have been another reason that I ultimately decided to leave. Because in order to get that Melchizedek priesthood ordination, I had to pay tithing. Alright, 10% of my income at the time. To this day, I would still have a problem with that, particularly because I wasn't being paid all that much and I was in college at the time. So the idea of being forced to pay tithing, I understand, that's how a lot of churches and religious organizations, that's how they operate, but they don't make it a mandatory thing in order to fully participate in the church life. I could be wrong. Please feel free to contact me if I'm wrong on that. And some other fairly restrictive things. Famously, I talked about that with Matt Sewell a little bit too, the whole no drinking thing. It's actually more than just no drinking. This is found in the Doctrine and Covenants section 89, and it's called The Word of Wisdom. How the LDS Church currently interprets that is no alcohol, also no tobacco, so you can't be smoking or chewing tobacco or anything. No coffee and no tea. So coffee and tea, that'll get you to hell. I was spared having to go through the LDS temple. I only set foot in a temple once. Shortly after my conversion, the temple in St. Louis opened, and they had the open house, and we went to the open house and got to see what it looked like inside. Since then, I've driven past a couple of other temples. One was the Houston temple, which was not too far from my grandmother's house. And the other one I kind of have to drive by every day, and that'd be the Kansas City temple, which is near Liberty. In fact, now I think about it, northwestern Missouri is littered with LDS historical sites, and that's in parts one of the more unusual teachings of the church. They taught that the Garden of Eden was in Independence, Missouri. The historic Liberty Jail, which is a church site now, is just a couple of blocks from the chess club. And there are sites in Davies and Caldwell counties. So lots of LDS history just around here. And even around here, we have all the LDS splinter groups, if you will, calling our area home. Most notably, the Community of Christ, the RLDS, as they were formerly known. They too have a temple in Independence, that also very hard to miss. It's the building with the silver spiral going up into the sky. And unlike LDS temples, this temple is open to the public. And I think it was about 10 years ago, I went over and took the tour. But what goes on in those temples, they are very secretive about that. And I do recall taking what they called temple prep courses, where they talked, but very vaguely, about what goes on, and the idea of wearing temple garments did come up in these courses, also known as Holy Mormon underwear. I said I never actually went through the temple myself, so I was spared having to wear the garments. But I did read a lot about what happens in the temple, because even then, this is early 2000s, and I was a student at UMKC at the time. I came across, it was Richard Packham's websites, which talked in detail about what happens in LDS temples. And in such detail that they will never mention in those temple prep courses. I'm not going to go into details about that, A, because I didn't experience it myself, and B, I need to give a shout out to Mike Norton, better known as New Name Noah, who is another ex-Mormon, one who was raised in the church, who had the balls, if you will, to use a valid temple recommend. That's what they're called. It's the little passage in the temples. He had a valid temple recommend and snuck into the LDS temples and recorded the endowment, both the film version and the live version, as done inside the Salt Lake City temple.
The observant craftsman can not be long among the Mormon people without noting the not infrequent use made of certain emblems and symbols which have come to be associated in the public mind with the Masonic fraternity. And now and then he will catch expressions and phrases in conversation and literature which are suggestive, to say the least. If he should continue his residence in Utah, he will sometimes be made aware of the fact, when shaking hands with a Mormon neighbor or friend, that there is a pressure of the hand as though some sort of a grip is being given. Visitors and residents of Utah often remark upon the extensive use made of certain emblems, as, for example, the conventional beehive. This familiar figure occupies the center of the Great Seal of the state. A model of immense size rises from the roof of the beautiful Hotel Utah, and one of the smaller proportions crowns the platform on the cupola of the Beehive House, the official residence of the president of the church. It is noticeably prominent on the great bronze doors which guard the entrance to the sacred precincts of the Salt Lake Temple, as well as on doors of commercial and other buildings. It is placed on the tops of newel posts of the cement steps which lead to the entrance of meeting houses and tabernacles, and frequently appears with effect in the decorative schemes of interiors, as in the lobby of Hotel Utah. Other symbols with which the public is more or less familiar are used extensively, more especially in and about the Salt Lake Temple, and presumably in all other temples of the Mormon Church. On the interior of this building we learn from an unquestioned authority. There are in the walls several series of stories of emblematical designs and significance, representing the earth, moon, sun, and stars. On the east center tower is an inscriptive, the letters deep cut, lined with gold, which reads, "Holiness to the Lord." This inscription, it might be noted, appears over the doorway of some of the business establishments conducted by the church, and over the entrance to the church tithing house, and it is given place on the stationery used in the official correspondence conducted by church authorities. Immediately beneath this inscription, over the central casement of the east tower of the temple, is the emblem of the clasped hands. On the corresponding stones above the upper windows in each of the central towers is carved the all-seeing eye. Covering the plate glass double doors on the east and west sides of the temple, each of which is 4 by 12 feet, are bronze grills of intricate patterns which carry medallions of the beehive, while an escutcheon cut in relief shows the clasped hands circled by a wreath. In the garden room of the temple, the ceiling is embellished with oil paintings to represent clouds and the sky, in which appear the sun, moon, and stars. In the center of this room and against the south wall is a platform which is reached by 3 steps. On the platform is an altar upon which rests the Bible. In the terrestrial room at the east end is a raised floor reached by 3 steps. Passing now from this phase of the subject, we come next to the language used in a part of the temple ceremonies. Here we are dependent for authorities, mainly upon certain exposés, though collateral evidence is not wanting. The exposés referred to are 3 in number, and they are separated from each other in time by almost a generation. A comparison of the 3 accounts shows that the first or oldest one differs from the other 2 or later ones in one significant particular at least. From the Van Dusen account, it appears that in the Nauvoo temple use was made of a larger number of stages or degrees in these ceremonies than was the case later, and that these extended to and included the 7th. This fact seems to point to the conclusion that the work was in a preliminary or experimental stage in Nauvoo, and that later it was developed and perfected into its present form, which included the practical omission of the last 4 degrees. A well-informed member of the Mormon Church, in conversation with the writer, accounted for the character of the Van Dusen statements upon a different supposition, though upon what authority was not disclosed. He said that Van Dusen was a liar, and further that he was a Mason. It may very well have been that he was a Mason, although no records are known to the writer which support that claim. As will be shown later, the followers of Joseph Smith believed that the temple ceremonies were revealed to the prophet complete, and more than a year before he became a Mason, and that proof of this is to be found in the Doctrine and Covenants. As a preliminary to a consideration of some of the language of the temple ritual, it may not be amiss to note certain objects and articles used in connection with that ritual. The garments worn by both men and women during a goodly portion of the ceremonies are of white cloth and of the one-piece pattern. On the right breast is a square, and on the left compasses. There are other marks or openings which are of no special interest to us here. As used in the temple at Nauvoo, the slits representing a pair of compasses were on the knees rather than on the left breast. The pattern of this garment, the wearer is informed, was revealed to Joseph Smith direct from heaven, and in the same as that worn by Adam and Eve. At one point in the ceremonies, the devil comes in wearing a silk hat and having on a Masonic apron. This apron is embellished with two columns with a serpent suspended midway between, and a serpent entwined about the base of each. The aprons worn by the men and women are alike, and are described as being a square half yard of green silk, with 9 fig leaves worked on them in brown sewing silk. Those in use at Nauvoo were of white cloth about 18 inches square, with green silk leaves pasted on. In the old Endowment House at Salt Lake, the ceiling of the Garden of Eden room was painted much of the same as that described above, with these additions. In each corner there was a Masonic emblem, in one compasses, in another a square, and in the other two a level and a plumb. The opening part of the temple ceremonies, which have been characterized by a Mormon writer as the Masonic sacred drama of the fall of man, need not detain us. Here occurs the washings and anointings and assumption of the garment before referred to, and a representation in dialogue of the creation of the world and woman. Following this preparatory part, the first obligation or oath is taken. One of the several couples kneels at the altar to represent Adam and Eve, and all participate in the ceremonies. The audience stands with the right hand raised to a square when the following oath is taken. We and each of us solemnly bind ourselves that we will not reveal any of the secrets of the first token of the Aaronic priesthood, with its accompanying name, sign, or penalty. So I do so. I agree that my throat may be cut from ear to ear, and my tongue torn out by its roots. Grip. The grip is very simple. Hands clasped, pressing the point of the knuckles of the index finger with the thumb. Sign. In executing the signs of the penalty, the hand palm down is placed across the body, so that the thumb comes directly under and a little behind the ear. The hand is drawn sharply to the right across the throat, the elbow standing out at a position of 90 degrees from the body. The hand is dropped from the square to the side. In the earliest form of these ceremonies, as used in Nauvoo in 1846, this obligation, or a part of it at least, appears to have been given in what was termed the 6th degree. The exercises then proceed. Various characters appear and carry on a dialogue, and then a robe and sandals are put on the candidates, and the apron replaced, and the second oath is administered. We and each of us do solemnly promise and bind ourselves never to reveal any of the secrets of this priesthood, with the accompanying name, grip, and penalty. Should we do so, we agree that our breasts may be torn open, our heart and vitals torn out and given to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field. Grip. Clasp the right hand and place the thumb into the hollow of the knuckles between the first and second fingers. Sign. The sign is made by extending the right hand across the left breast directly over the heart, then drawing it rapidly from left to right with the elbow at the square, then dropping the hand to the side. The candidates are then conducted into what is known as the celestial room. Here also characters appear and carry on conversation relating to the ceremonies, and other preparations are made for the administering of the third oath, which is as follows. You and each of you do covenant and promise that you will never reveal any of the secrets of the priesthood, with any accompanying name, sign, and penalty. Should you do so, you agree that your body may be cut asunder, and all your bowels gush out. In this, the left hand is placed palm upright, directly in front of the body, there being a right angle formed at the elbow. The right hand, palm down, is placed under the elbow of the left, then drawn sharply across the bowels, and both hands dropped to the side. The grip is given by grasping the right hands so that the little fingers are interlocked, and the forefinger presses the wrist. This is known as the patriarchal grip, or the true sign of the nail. The neophytes are then ready for the threefold obligation, which relates to the law of sacrifice, the law of chastity, and the law of vengeance. The last named law, it might be noted in passing, is given, with but slight variation, by all three of the authorities quoted here. The character of the second law is indicated by its title, and is not without significance, though it need not detain us. Following these obligations, the candidates are seated and a long sermon or lecture is given, in which the entire history of the temple work is rehearsed. They are then instructed in the true order of prayer. In this, when all is in readiness, the elder kneels at the altar, his right arm raised to the square, his left hand extended as if to receive a blessing. A form of prayer is then offered, which, it is said, is used in all priesthood meetings. The candidates are then ready to pass through the veil. In the veil are to be seen the square and compasses, also other openings which represent the slits in the knees of every garment. In the room where this veil is there is also a platform upon which the candidates take seats when their names are called, and which is ascended by 3 steps. With the aid of an attendant, the neophyte gives the required answers in grips, which include the 2 grips of the Aaronic priesthood and the 2 grips of the Melchizedek priesthood. Following the last grip, a dialogue ensues. Elohim: what is this? Neophyte: the 2nd grip of the Melchizedek priesthood, patriarchal grip, or sure sign of the nail. Elohim: has it a name? Neophyte: it has. Elohim: will you give it to me? Neophyte: I cannot, for I have not yet received it. For this purpose I have come to converse with the Lord behind the veil. Elohim: you shall receive it upon the 5 points of fellowship through the veil. These are foot to foot, knee to knee, breast to breast, hand to back, and mouth to ear. We may here take leave of the temple ceremonies, but there are certain other matters derived from a different source that have a significance for us. First is language used by a brilliant writer of the Mormon faith. In a chapter that deals with the Logan Temple at Logan, Utah, the author contrasts the views of this structure held by Latter-day Saints and Gentiles, and then proceeds. To the Mormons the Logan Temple is a grand Masonic fabric, reared unto the name of the God of Israel, where endowments are given, and ordinances administered, and services performed which concern salvation and exaltation both of the living and the dead, and connected with the Mormon Church. After referring to a supposed polygamic theocracy, which he says is popularly supposed by non-Mormons to exist in the Logan Temple, the author continues. And what makes this matter of so much importance and interest is that the Logan Temple today is looked upon as the Masonic embodiment of the polygamic theocracy. The above is followed by a paragraph that deals with several more, particularly 2 exposés of the endowment house secrets. Then the author says: meantime the Mormon apostles and elders, with a becoming repugnance and Masonic reticence quite understandable to members of every Masonic order, have shrank from a public exhibition of the sacred things of their temple. When describing certain scenes enacted in the endowment ceremonies, he refers to the Garden of Eden representation as the Masonic sacred drama of the fall of man, and again a sign, a grip, and a keyword were communicated and impressed upon us, and the 3rd degree of Mormon endowment, or the 1st degree of the Aaronic priesthood, was conferred. And finally our author refers to the oath of chastity alluded to above, and marks with special emphasis the fact that the oath implies that no man dare, under penalty of death, to betray his brother's wife or daughter. Perhaps the most significant utterance bearing on the subject that has come from one who is in a position to know whereof he speaks is that which comes from a member of the present quorum of the 12 apostles. In an address delivered in the Salt Lake Tabernacle on the last Sunday of 1919, as reported in one of the daily papers, the speaker said: modern Masonry is a fragmentary presentation of the ancient order established by King Solomon, from whom it is said to have been handed down through the centuries. Frequent assertion that some details of the Mormon temple ordinances resemble Masonic rites led him to refer to the subject. The speaker declared, and he added, that he was not sorry there was such a similarity, because of the fact that the ordinances and rites revealed to Joseph Smith constituted a reintroduction upon the earth of the divine plan inaugurated in the Temple of Solomon in ancient days. Plans for the ordinances to be observed in the temple built at Nauvoo were revealed to Joseph Smith as recorded in the Doctrine and Covenants, more than a year prior to the time the founder of the Mormon Church became a member of the Masonic order. The latter order, the speaker affirmed, claimed origin with King Solomon, but through lapses and departures which had naturally come into the order in the course of time, it had fallen somewhat into imperfection of detail. The temple plan revealed to Joseph Smith was the perfect Solomonic plan, under which no man was permitted to obtain the secrets of Masonry unless he also held the holy priesthood. The speaker then explained the authentic proof in Masonic history went to show that the 5 lodges of the order established by Joseph Smith and other members of the Mormon Church had been discountenanced by the great organization through mistaken non-observance of a mere technicality. The Mormon lodges, Apostle Ballard declared, had been accepting and advancing members in the order by viva voce vote instead of by secret ballot, as the rule required. but, he said, the technical offence had been seized upon as a cause for repudiating the lodges established by members of an unpopular church. It is not our purpose to examine critically any of the assertions made by the speaker. Enough has been said in the preceding pages, and more evidence could be adduced to show that the action of the Grand Lodge of Illinois with reference to the Mormon lodges was due to other causes than the one specified by the speaker quoted. Further, no objections will be urged here to the acceptance on the part of any one of the statement that the temple ritual parts of which have been presented in these pages was revealed to Joseph Smith or to any one else direct from heaven. The writer will only say that no evidence has come to his knowledge which points to any such supernatural derivation. It is worthy of mention in this connection that the prophet records the fact that on the 4th day of May, 1842, he instructed certain of his followers in the principles and order of the priesthood attending to washing, anointings, endowments, and the communication of keys pertaining to the Aaronic priesthood, and so on to the highest order of the Melchizedek priesthood, setting forth the order pertaining to the Ancient of Days, and that in this council was instigated the ancient order of things for the first time in these last days. This, of course, does not preclude the possibility of the revelation of this order having been received much earlier than the date given, as is held by the historian of the church.
And of course, I need to talk about the scriptures. Now of course, this is a Christian-based group, so they use the Bible, provided that it's translated correctly, and adding some other scriptures. They use the King James version of the Bible with all of annotations and everything, but they also use 3 different books. One I've already mentioned a few times in this episode as it is. That's the Doctrine and Covenants, or D&C for short, and they're a bunch of modern day revelations that Joseph Smith received. The other, of course, is how they got the nickname Mormon in the first place, and that's the Book of Mormon, which Joseph Smith claimed he translated from gold plates. In reality, he just made everything up. And another book they use as part of the scriptures called the Pearl of Great Price, and this is one that contains some interpretations of parts of the Bible, as well as the Joseph Smith story of how he came to have the first vision of God and Jesus, and how he came to have the golden plates and everything. But most controversially, it contains something called the Book of Abraham, which, like the Book of Mormon, he just made shit up. Alright, and claims it came from ancient Egyptian papyrus. Much like the Catholic Church, there is a hierarchy to it. In the Catholic Church, the local level is called the parish, and the one after that is the diocese. Mormonism, the LDS Church, is kind of set up the same way, but the local level is called the ward, which is a political term, yes I know, but that's what they call them. And right above the ward is the stake, and so on and so forth, until you get to what they call the general authorities. The Catholic equivalent would be the College of Cardinals at Vatican City. Other differences at the local ward level, what the Catholics would call the pastor, Mormons call the bishop. And what's Catholics call the bishop, Mormons call stake president. At the top of the food chain, if you will, the general authorities, and even on top of the general authorities, you have both the quorum of the 12 apostles and the first presidency. First presidency is 3 guys: the president of the church, at the time of this recording, Russell M. Nelson, who for some reason hates the nickname Mormon, and his 2 counselors. And below them, quorum of 12 apostles. And below them, you have their 70s and area authorities and the presiding bishopric. And another thing that differentiates Mormonism from Catholicism is I don't hear Pope Francis saying that he's a prophet, seer, and revelator. last a few days at this job, so I don't talk about it much. But I worked for a couple of days at Beneficial Life Insurance, which is owned by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, believe it or not. And that was before the missionaries came knocking on my door. And I think it's interesting just how much, for such an insular group, just how much political power they have in this country. I'm getting off on a tangent here. Just that was my experience, and that still informs me a little bit to this day. You know, I don't really drink coffee, and I think this is a good time to wrap things up. So thank you for listening. As always, we got our Patreon, patreon.com/Mike Chernovsky. If you want to give just $5, and I'll mention your name on this podcast. We've got our blog at uncalledfor.home.blog. We've got our Facebook. We're on iTunes, Google Play, you name it, just everything that's not SoundCloud. So thank you so much for listening. We'll talk to you next time, and always remember, we thank thee, O God, for our prophets to guide us in these latter days. Talk to you later.
This podcast is Uncalled For is hosted, produced, and edited by Mike Chernovsky. Opening music is Iron Bacon by Kevin MacLeod at incompetech.com. Licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0 license. Outro music is Saturday's Church by Montplaisir, licensed under a Creative Commons 0.1.0 universal license, and Cello Suite No. 1 in G, Prelude by Kevin MacLeod at incompetech.com, licensed under Creative Commons, by Attribution 4.0 license. Special thanks to LibraryVox.org for the supplemental recordings. LibraryVox recordings are public domain in the USA. If you would like to support this podcast or any of Mike's other creative endeavors, please consider making a donation at patreon.com/Mike Chernovsky. That's MikeCzerniewski. Donations over $5 will receive a special thanks on a future podcast. Thank you so much for listening. We will see you next time.